Today we're looking at a full-blown standoff between Brussels and Washington over tech regulation, a stunning admission from France about its food supply, Germany's radical pension overhaul that could change retirement forever, and a Trump interview that's sending shockwaves through European capitals. Plus Hungary's open rebellion against EU migration rules, a bizarre train incident that perfectly captures Germany's infrastructure crisis, and why China just became Europe's unlikely savior. Stick around because what I'm saving for the end will tie all of this together in a way that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about where the West is heading. I spent years inside one of those big legacy media operations, watching editors kill stories that didn't fit the approved narrative, seeing how facts got bent to serve powerful interests. I walked away from that world because I couldn't stomach the dishonesty anymore. Now I work for myself, I answer to nobody, and I tell you what's actually happening, not what some corporate board wants you to believe. Before we dive in, if you appreciate this kind of independent analysis, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And here's something I need to say from the heart. We put serious work into fact-checking every claim, every detail, because in this age of misinformation, accuracy matters more than ever. If you value that commitment to truth, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It makes a real difference in keeping this operation running without corporate strings attached. And trust me, what I've saved for the end of today's episode is worth every second of your time. Now let's get into it. The European Commission just drew a line in the sand, and it's aimed directly at Washington. Brussels announced it will not, under any circumstances, back down from its enforcement actions against Silicon Valley giants, despite mounting pressure from American officials. This comes right after EU regulators slapped Elon Musk's X platform with a €120 million fine for violating the bloc's online content rules. The American reaction? Fury. Absolute fury. But the European Commission isn't flinching. They've made it crystal clear they'll collect every cent of that fine one way or another. What's fascinating here is how quickly this escalated. The Green Party leadership in the European Parliament immediately jumped in, demanding that Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tighten the screws even further. Their argument? €120 million is pocket change for a billionaire like Musk. They want Brussels to go harder, levy bigger penalties, and show Silicon Valley that Europe's digital rules have real teeth. This isn't just about one social media platform anymore. This is about sovereignty, about who gets to set the rules in the digital age. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Behind this very public showdown over tech regulation lies a much bigger financial chess game involving frozen Russian assets. We're talking about €185 billion sitting in Belgian depository Euroclear, plus another €25 billion scattered across private bank accounts throughout the EU. And right now, European leaders are scrambling to figure out how to actually access that money. Why? Because they need it desperately to cover old debts and fund ongoing commitments. According to documents obtained by Politico, EU member states have to individually provide billions in guarantees before they can tap into those frozen assets for new loans to Ukraine. Germany alone might have to guarantee up to €52 billion. But here's the catch. If countries like Hungary refuse to participate and France stays suspiciously quiet, those guarantee amounts for everyone else go up. And we haven't even talked about what happens if this whole scheme falls apart. The stakes here are astronomical. Now here's what most people are missing about this financial puzzle. European experts are now admitting the EU needs these funds not primarily for Ukraine, but to settle its own old obligations. Get this, €45 billion would go directly back to G7 countries that already lent Ukraine money last year. That's just paying back old debt. Another $115 billion gets funneled into Ukrainian defense industry, and $50 billion covers current budget expenses like salaries, pensions, and government operations. So Brussels is using frozen Russian assets essentially as collateral to refinance its own balance sheet. The final decision comes December 18th, and that's when we'll see if this whole house of cards can actually stand. Over in Germany, they're floating a pension reform idea that sounds reasonable on the surface, but reveals something much deeper about Europe's economic crisis. The proposal? Tie retirement age not to how old you are, but to how many years you've paid into the system. Work early, retire early. Sounds fair, right? But Germany's labor minister is calling for a completely new system, not just tweaking the current one. And here's the kicker. The country's top economic advisors are pushing back hard, insisting that anyone healthy enough to work should work longer period, to keep the pension system from collapsing entirely. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz just made a fascinating admission that's causing quite a stir. He acknowledged he should have clarified sooner what he meant when he said migrants have changed the face of German cities. Now he's trying to walk a tightrope, insisting Germany needs migration, needs foreign specialists, particularly in healthcare and elder care. The medical system would collapse without immigrant workers, he says. But then, in the same breath, he talks about completely neglected cities that need to change and insists that anyone who won't follow German rules needs to leave. It's a contradictory message that perfectly captures Europe's immigration dilemma. And speaking of contradictions, Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul wants his portrait hanging next to the federal president's in every German embassy and consulate worldwide. Critics are calling it vanity, even comparing it to cult of personality tactics. The Foreign Ministry defends it as fostering closer ties between overseas missions and headquarters. But here's the thing. Wadephul's predecessor, Annalena Baerbock, never dared make such a request. And Wadephul's recent trip to China produced exactly zero meaningful agreements or improved relations. The visit was, let's be honest, a failure. So naturally, he wants his picture on every embassy wall. You can't make this up. But wait, there's more from Germany, and this part is genuinely significant. The Bundestag is preparing to approve 29 military procurement contracts next week, totaling a record 52 billion euros. This is part of Berlin's broader plan to transform the Bundeswehr into Europe's most powerful military force. For years, Germany's armed forces suffered from equipment shortages across all branches and ammunition deficits running into tens of billions. Now, they're planning hundreds of billions in defense acquisitions across land, air, sea, space, and cyber domains. This represents a fundamental shift in German strategic thinking, and it's happening fast. Now let's turn to France, because what just got announced, there should be front-page news everywhere. But it's getting buried. France's Minister of Agriculture, Annie Genevard, just declared that French food security is under threat. For the first time in nearly half a century, France's food balance could turn negative. Think about that. France, one of Europe's agricultural powerhouses, might soon be importing more food than it exports. The minister's explanation? The United States and China have dramatically increased government investment in agriculture over recent years, while the EU has done the opposite, slashing support for farmers. French farmer unions say they'll support the minister's call for more production, but they're also furious because the government has been actively working against them for years. French farmers have repeatedly taken to the streets in protest, and they're not alone. Massive farmer protests have now erupted even in Crete, where agricultural workers have blocked airports, demanding the resumption of EU agricultural subsidies and protesting rising production costs alongside falling prices for their products. Nobody's listening to them. Not in France, not in Greece, not anywhere. And now we're hearing that France's food security is threatened. The warnings were there all along. President Emmanuel Macron just made a remarkable statement that tells you everything about Europe's current desperation. He admitted that European industry faces a life or death question caught between China and America. Europe suffers, he said, importing too much, exporting too little, facing a massive trade deficit. And then came the surprising part. Macron called for China to invest in Europe, the way Europe once invested in China. This would create jobs and value inside Europe, he argued. The French president is essentially pleading for Chinese capital to save European industry. We've gone from containing China to begging China for investment. That's quite a pivot. And the crisis in France keeps deepening. Workers at the Louvre, yes, the world-famous museum in Paris, have voted for an indefinite strike starting December 15th. The unions are saying the situation has reached absurdity due to chronic staff shortages and severe technical problems with the building itself. The condition of this globally renowned museum is, to put it mildly, disastrous. Management has let everything deteriorate. This isn't just about one museum. It's a symptom of infrastructure decay across France, across much of Europe, really. Meanwhile, Czech President Petr Pavel has appointed Andrej Babiš as the new prime minister. Babiš leads the movement called Action of Dissatisfied Citizens, which won October's parliamentary elections. That was the choice of the Czech people, and there's no getting around it. Babiš took his oath in Prague and will head a three-party coalition government of 16 ministers. The president is expected to formally appoint them early next week. This represents another shift rightward in Central Europe, another rejection of the established order. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán just announced an uprising against the EU's migration pact. His message was blunt. Brussels is trying to force Hungary to either pay or accept migrants. That's unacceptable, Orbán declared. Hungary already spends enough defending the EU's external border. His conclusion? We will not accept a single migrant, and we will not pay for anyone else's migrants. Hungary will not comply with the migration pact measures. Rebellions are beginning, he announced. That's not diplomatic language. That's open defiance. Over in Britain, as Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government ratings sink and Nigel Farage's right-wing party surges in popularity, authorities have suddenly launched an investigation into possible violations by Farage's party during the 2024 elections. They're digging through old records, looking for anything. The suspicion, and that's the key word, suspicion, is that the party possibly exceeded campaign spending limits in one constituency and failed to declare certain expenses. Possibly. Maybe. We'll see if they find anything or if this is just a convenient way to harass a political rival whose popularity is becoming inconvenient. Now let's talk about what Trump just told Politico in a fascinating interview that's rattling European capitals. When asked about his new national security strategy that shocked Europe, Trump painted a stark picture. Today's Europe is a completely different place, he said. If things continue as they are, many of these countries, in his view, will no longer be viable. Their migration policy is a disaster, Trump stated flatly. He claimed America was also heading for catastrophe, but he stopped it. Now nobody crosses the U.S. border, he asserted. Europe, in contrast, is seeing arrivals from all corners of the world. Trump admitted he loves Paris, but then corrected himself. He loved Paris. Now it's a completely different city. And London? The mayor is, in Trump's opinion, completely incompetent. Trump says he loves London, loves Paris, his roots are in Europe, everyone knows this, but when asked directly whether he would influence European elections, Trump clarified he wants to run the United States, not Europe, but he has supported people many Europeans don't like. Viktor Orbán, Javier Milei in Argentina. Orbán handles migration well because he doesn't let anyone into his country, Trump noted. Poland also handles it well, he emphasized. Here's what struck me about that interview. Trump isn't hiding his preferences. He's openly identifying with European politicians who take hardline stances on immigration, who push back against Brussels, who challenge the establishment consensus. Whether you agree with him or not, he's laying his cards on the table. And we just learned Trump has unfrozen deliveries of advanced AI processors to China. So we're witnessing a rapprochement with Beijing even as European leaders like Macron are simultaneously courting Chinese investment. The geopolitical chessboard is being completely rearranged. And here's your moment of absurdity that perfectly captures the state of German infrastructure. Train passengers in Saxony-Anhalt faced major disruptions for an unusual reason. A marten, that's a small weasel-like animal, damaged an overhead power line, causing a short circuit. The line sagged and was then torn down by a passing freight train over a 300-meter section. People are naturally asking, how could a small animal disrupt train service for thousands of passengers? But here's the beautiful part. The situation is unique because the culprit doesn't fall under any legal statute and has no legal address for filing complaints. It's the perfect force majeure excuse. Deutsche Bahn, which as you know faces constant criticism over delays and problems, can now just shrug and say, nature did it. What can we do? Sometimes reality writes its own satire. So let's step back and look at what all of this means. The European Union is simultaneously picking fights with Washington over tech regulation, desperately trying to access frozen Russian assets to cover all debts, watching its food security crumble, pleading with China for investment, and dealing with open rebellion from member states like Hungary over migration. France can't keep the Louvre properly staffed. Germany is radically rethinking pensions and pumping record sums into military expansion. Britain is investigating opposition parties as their popularity surges, and Trump is openly signaling which European leaders he supports while warming relations with China. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a system under enormous strain, a political and economic order that's fracturing in real time. The old certainties about European unity, about transatlantic partnership, about who's aligned with whom, all of that is up for grabs now. We're watching something fundamental shift, and most media outlets are still covering these stories as if they're separate, unconnected events. They're not. They're all pieces of the same puzzle, all symptoms of the same underlying transformation. The question isn't whether change is coming. The change is already here. The question is where it leads. If you found this analysis valuable, please like this video and subscribe for more independent coverage that connects the dots mainstream media won't touch. And from the heart, if you can support this channel as a sponsor, it means the world. This kind of in-depth research and fact-checking takes real resources, and every bit of support helps keep us independent and accountable only to you, the audience. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are these stories. We'll keep watching, keep analyzing, keep asking the uncomfortable questions, because that's what independent journalism is supposed to do.